Welcome to the Clayton podcast, where I help you view current events through the lens of the ancient wisdom of Scripture. This is a new segment we're calling One-on-One, where I sit down with someone and get to just share insight, glean from their wisdom, learn from their experience. In some settings, we may have some dialogue and even argument on opposing positions, sharpening our swords so that all of us can lean into truth and clarity as much as possible. Today, we're starting off with one of my close friends, one of my heroes of the faith, Danny Davis, who is the president, director of Together For Haiti. Together For Haiti is an incredible nonprofit that is focused on the people of Haiti. They have unique initiatives to reach the next generation, as well as to help the adults in Haiti really prosper. I got to know Danny, as well as the Together For Haiti family, Pastor John Alix over in Haiti, by visiting there many, many times between 2010 and about 2015. And so it is my great honor to introduce you guys as we get into today's one-on-one. Well, Danny, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. So excited to hear from you and hoping that you will help us shape just kind of our broad view on world missions, and then really hoping to learn a lot about what's going on in Haiti, our neighbor here in the Western Hemisphere, very close to us, just right off the coast. So why don't you start by just giving a little introduction of who you are and the work that you guys do at Together For Haiti?
Sure, absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. As Clayton said in his intro, we've known each other for a while, been friends for a while, and really have enjoyed building that relationship, getting to work together, serve together, specifically in Haiti back several years ago. Married, have 4 kids, three still at home, and living here in the Central Texas area, and been working now specifically for Together For Haiti since 2016. Our focus really is on empowering the Haitian people, providing tools, training, and resources that create those opportunities that do not exist for the Haitian people to educate themselves, improve themselves, and really have a shot at a self-sustainable life in the future.
I love that. One of the things that I'm really hoping, especially when I bring people who are in the ministry in whatever capacity they happen to be in the ministry, is just to hear a little bit about that call. I have a friend, Shane Pruitt. He wrote a book last year. It's convicting to me, where churches are just not calling people into the ministry like they used to. I think you would agree that the same is true for foreign missions. And so what was your journey like? What was life like before the lucrative career of being a full-time missionary? Was there resistance? What are the blessings as well as the struggles of just this call that God has placed on your life?
Sure, absolutely. Man, your podcast is not that long for me to tell the whole thing, but yeah, for sure was very resistant to the idea initially. Really, my dad is a pastor; he's great at it, and that's good for him. I didn't really want anything to do with it at all. But God has other plans and other ideas, and so I was a business major at Texas A&M when really sensed God's call in the ministry, pushed back on that a little bit, but eventually came to a place where I understood what it was I was called to and why. Have pursued that in the best ways I knew how. So did the seminary thing, was a student pastor because wasn't everybody in the early 2000s that went into ministry. And so did that, was associate pastor of missions, and had a variety of experiences and opportunities that really helped form that sense of calling and direction that God would lead. I think I've looked back on that now that I'm in my late 40s. I've looked back on that in recent history and really contemplated. And I would say now, with some wisdom and understanding looking back, I still don't know that I have a clue or really understand what it is God was doing or why, other than my call was to walk in that moment, to walk in obedience, and to take that next step of obedience, and how all that's fit together. And here I am doing this now in Haiti. Is a whole kind of other set of stories and situations that God put me in. But I think the call to ministry for me has really just been learning to walk in obedience to the things that God was calling me to do in that moment and at that time, to glorify Him and to help spread the gospel.
Yeah, I love that. There's this common thread between people when I talk to them about calling, which seems to be this very ethereal idea, hard to pin down, really fun to preach about. And then everyone goes home and is like, I don't know what that means. God has put a calling on your life. And everyone's like, I guess, man, I'm just trying to pay my bills, But the idea of your calling being more like a Polaroid than just, we're digital now. You take a picture, you see it. It develops, and typically it develops through movement and through really just almost microscopic steps of faith. You don't even realize in real time. And God uses those to put you in different positions, different environments, put different people in your life. That's always my encouragement, is like, take a step,
Yeah.
Whatever you do, don't stand still. I had a boss who was kind of like a wise old sage, He looked older than he was because all his hair was white and he had like a long kind of Gandalf beard thing going on. And he had all these sayings, and he would always say, you can't steer a parked car. And I love that saying. I've adopted it. It doesn't sound as cool coming from me, but I love that picture of like, you were moving. You were just taking a step, taking a position, associate pastor of missions, exposed to missions. And I just really encourage people, take a step. And even if it's not the step, it's a step, and you're moving, and God can just gently guide and correct. And the Holy Spirit is already moving. So as you move, a lot of times what you're doing is just kind of stepping into that flow of the Holy Spirit. And I also just love that you say, looking back, it still doesn't all make sense, and I think that's why we hold on to the hope of eternity, where it's like, okay, like we will see it someday. It's like a dimly lit mirror right now, but someday we'll see it clearly. So I love that. Well, I really want to glean with your experience in world missions over the last 10, 20 years, being on the ground, being in those conversations. World missions is something that I feel like, especially post-pandemic, where so much attention was put like here on the here and now in our country, just doesn't feel like enough conversations are happening about it. So what's kind of the state of world missions right now? What are some of the good things? What are some of the pain points? Help us get just a broader view of what's going on in world missions.
Yeah, sure. I think part of it is what you already alluded to. There's not a lot of call on people's lives anymore into missions or ministry. And I think in my experience and what I've seen, missions even less so. I think back to some of the influences in my life and remembering specific moments, hearing pastors and leaders call people to missions. I think in my own personal spiritual growth and development, being drawn to, led to, shared with sermons and books and things that were calling people into something greater than themselves and into this life of because, for a lack of a better term, what we call vocational ministry or vocational missions, this life of living that out daily in some capacity. So I think that's a huge part of what's going on, because what I get the sense is, and from folks I talk to, is manpower, people power is lacking. There's just not enough bodies that are willing to go, and folks that are willing to commit to this life. And so as generations of missionaries get older, what they're finding is there's not people behind them then to step into that gap. And I know there's probably specific areas and specific locations that would say, oh, but in our circumstance, and I think, but thinking globally and sort of the whole world, there's a missing element of people that are willing to go. I think there's a I think you combine that with some different views, is the way I would put it, on what exactly the church really needs to be focused on.
Mm,
And so, unfortunately, those conversations, like a lot of things in our culture right now, have divided us into camps.
mm,
And so there's like, well, this is missions is supposed to be all about evangelism and church planting, and so people kind of gather around that camp. Or
right.
well, missions is supposed to be about helping people, or be creative like businesses missions kind of thing. Or and so it creates all these camps that then end up not being able to communicate across those boundaries, I think, sometimes, because we're just absolutely convinced of our rightness,
Mm,
and it makes us unwilling to hear somebody else. And I think, as you look at, one of the things that we've tried to do with Together for Haiti is take that holistic view of, absolutely, and most importantly, people need Jesus.
right.
But there are some other things that need to be done that we feel like is living out the call. Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, he says, "Go and make disciples."
Mm,
And so my understanding of what that means, and the way that we try to live that out, is walking alongside people and really teaching them the depth and the width and the breadth of who God is, and
mm.
what He's done, and for them, not only spiritually, but also here and now, the kingdom of heaven on earth, in this moment. And so I think all of those things that people struggle with, and how to communicate across these different camps, really becomes a challenge.
Yeah, I hate the idea that we would separate the call to world missions from the call to evangelism. And I haven't thought of it that way. A huge like light bulb went off as you were talking about that, because we have kind of, it's okay, it's helpful to categorize and segment just so you can think through things. But then the danger is you compartmentalize past the point of it being helpful. And so it's like world missions, well, we're going to speak a different language and we have to fly over an ocean, so that feels really different than planning a church in Denver. And sure. However, the difference in culture from San Antonio to Queens, New York, is different enough that you should probably approach it with the same rigor as if you were planting in Indonesia. And if you're not going to become a cultural expert of that area, you're probably not going to spread the gospel very well. And, Paul is doing this version of it in their kind of known segment of the world. And he says, I'm just going to become all things to all people. Like, I'm going to learn this culture and then I'm going to assimilate into it. And the call to evangelize comes from the Great Commission. And the Great Commission is a call to the ends of the earth. Acts version of it is a dear scripture to us at Meta Church. You'll receive power and the Holy Spirit comes on you. And you'll be my disciples in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. I was preaching on Luke 14 this past Sunday, and it's the parable of the banquet. And, the parable is basically people are invited to a banquet, and that would probably be the highlight of your lifetime if a wealthy person invited you. And everyone said they would come and then made excuses and did not come. And so then the wealthy guy throwing the banquet says, okay, then we're going to go get the outcasts in the city. And then if that's not crazy enough, we're going to go outside of the city into the highways and the hedges. And it uses this Greek word anakaz. It's this really strong word that's like compelled them to come. Like, it's a picture of getting on your knees and begging them to come to the banquet. And the banquet, Jesus is sitting with Pharisees, which is interesting all on its own, and their understanding of eternal life in Isaiah is a great banquet. It's this incredible picture of like, this is a call to go outside of where you are, and literally to go into foreign territory. For Israel, it was obviously all of the Gentile nations. And for us with modern travel, it's everyone everywhere. So yeah, I love that idea. I think that's a key takeaway. And as many hours as I've spent talking to you, man, that was a light bulb moment for me. You cannot separate these things. You can put them into categories in order to be effective, and talk about, okay, we are going to Ethiopia, so how are we going to do that well? But man, this is Matthew 28. This is Acts 1:8. Like this is all the Great Commission, whether you're planting in Houston, whether you're planting across the seas. Super, super helpful. So that's kind of the state of things. I also made me kind of curious. What role do you think technology and just the rapid innovation of technology is playing? Numbers are down of people signing up saying, send me, I will go overseas and do this. Technology can be a huge blessing if it's a tool used well. However, we are incarnational beings. I don't know that just throwing, some people across the sea is going to do all the work and not having physical bodies there. So how do you see kind of the pros and cons of the technological innovation that continues apace?
Sure. I think to the degree that technology becomes a useful tool, then I think just like in missions, just like in anything else, when it's a useful tool, then it's beneficial and can help close the gap, make the world, which is still a very big place, a little bit smaller, bring people together in ways that maybe wasn't possible even 10 or 15 years ago. Unfortunately, I think part of the problem with technology is it makes us lazy. And one of the things that I've seen is that, especially in the area of communication, which the gospel is very much something that must be communicated, both through your words and through your actions. And at times, I think the technology has made us lazy in a lot of ways. And so to the degree that then in missions, it would make us sort of apathetic or lazy, and not being proactive, not being intentional, not developing a strategy, not figuring out how to most effectively use this particular tool, whatever it is, that is technologically related, then it's having the opposite effect that it should have. And so, for example, using it as a tool to train churches or pastors or church leaders, Christians, in a place that maybe people couldn't easily access or couldn't go with simplicity and with the ease of the travel that we have, then technology becomes an incredible tool if you're intentional and strategic and plan around that. Making a TikTok video to your favorite worship song is probably trending toward the lazy part. You might get a lot of views and a lot of pats on the back. But again, as there was years ago when I was in student ministry, I heard a pastor say, talking about student ministry, he said, hey, look, if you have a banana split party at your church and you have 1 million kids show up to your banana split party, and you get in the Guinness Book of World Records for building the world's largest banana split, and then a year from that event, none of those kids are in the kingdom, what have you really done? And so to bring that to a modern conclusion would be, if you make a bunch of really cool videos and you put them on TikTok or YouTube or whatever, and you have a bunch of Instagram followers or whatever that sort of is for you within that context, and yet because of what you're doing, there's no way to know or follow up or disciple those people, connecting those people to a church, to a king, to the kingdom, deepening their walk with Jesus, then what are you really doing? You may be attracting a lot of attention,
sure,
but is that really being kingdom effective? And that's, I think, what we've got to weigh when we talk about technology, especially.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes. We're a culture who has like seemingly all knowledge in our smartphones, in our pockets. But we're also a culture who doesn't think very deeply through things. And even in kind of the vocational ministry side of things, I'm just shocked how few people often have very clear or a high level of clarity in the different aspects of their theological system, which is very difficult because, at least as I see it, you have concentric circles if you have like a holistic strategy where you have your methods, right? And your methods are going to decide largely what tools you're implementing and how you're implementing them, including technology. And then below that is your philosophy, which is how you're going to think in order to produce your methods. And then underneath your philosophy should be your theology. And so if you work in the local church, you should have a high level of clarity on your ecclesiology, because if you don't know what the church is, then how do you lead a church? Right? If you don't have clarity on what you believe missions is, then how do you develop a philosophy of how you think in order to introduce methods, including all of the tools that we have available to us? And I as simple as it is, I really like kind of the filter that you put on it, which is like, if you're doing this because you're lazy, then it's a bad tool. Even pragmatically, if it's effective across some variable of metrics, you get a lot of views or hearts or something on Instagram. But like the tool is what's guiding you, not your theology leading through your philosophy into your methodology. Then it's going to be short-lived, or it's going to be a banana split party where everyone gets to eat ice cream. But ultimately the goal theologically of why you're there doesn't get accomplished. So yeah, that's super helpful. I just wonder how much the technological innovation, even just on the gig economy, jobs are just different. The jobs that are available to make a full income weren't there when I was graduating high school. And as you know, I am so much younger than you. So
yes, you are.
Yeah. So I mean, it's wild, and it's so we're not calling people. And then even if they're not going to get a traditional 9-to-5 job, you can be a ship shopper, you can be a door dasher, you can hypothetically be some kind of influencer. Small percentage of people actually make a living off that. But okay, so much there, man. Great insight. I want to go to my next question, but first, I just want to tell people how they can support. I'm going to do this a couple of times because it matters to me. You go to togetherforhaiti.org. At togetherforhaiti.org, you can find out all about the work that they are doing. You see that big, beautiful green button right here that says donate. You can click on that. Everything helps. So if you can give, $5 a month, $50 a month, $500 a month, whatever you can give. I always give a little bit of a disclaimer. I know Danny agrees with it. I hope you're in a local church. If you're not, you should find one. There's a lot of good local churches, and you need to be giving to your local church first. But man, you need to be expanding your generosity, and God will bless that. This is an investment into something very significant. And as we're going to get to in the second half of this conversation, Together for Haiti is taking some very unique approach to missions and to helping out in Haiti, which is the poorest country in our Western hemisphere. It is our neighbor. We're told to love our neighbors. It's right next to us. Michael Phelps could swim there from the coast of Florida, right? It's very close. So togetherforhaiti.org, check that out. See what they're up to. Really consider setting up a monthly recurring gift to them. Really help out. All right. So the next thing I want to go to is helping us as believers and also helping us as churches just think through best practices for missions. I think we have some notion that we should be involved in like local and worldwide missions, at some level. But what are the things that we're going to make some broad sweeping statements. So whoever's listening, we're probably not talking about your church. We're just talking broadly about, but what are some things you're seeing kind of ubiquitous across the culture that you think could use some correction or maybe just some adjustments? What are some best practices that you could suggest to a local church body to help them be as effective as possible when it comes to global missions?
Sure, absolutely. I think, and we touched a little bit on this already. I think, but be intentional and develop a strategy. Really put some thought and process into what are we trying to accomplish. Build out that structure that you were talking about. Of we know what our theology is, and so how does that then impact the influence that we exert upon our community, and then our however big you want to make that state, nation, the world, but be intentional and be strategic about the way that you approach that and think that through. I think a lot of churches they have some sort of missions component, whether it's just giving money or trips or local stuff or some sort of combination of different things, because somewhere in the Bible it says something about we should be about reaching the world, and our neighbors and everybody in between. And but they don't put a whole lot of intentionality into it, and I think that's really critical,
Mm.
is being intentional, being strategic. I would also say, be focused on the people you're trying to help and the people you're trying to reach more than you are your own personal comfort, convenience, safety, and security. To
Mm.
borrow some phraseology from Alan Hirsch, um, the so often I think our approach to missions in the church is, we know that anytime we ask people to do something selfless that requires some sacrifice, whether that's financial or time or resources or knowledge, whatever that is, that because of that selflessness and that sacrifice, there's some spiritual growth and development that happens, and that's wonderful. But a lot of times that becomes the primary focus for a
Mm.
local church. Says, well, we want our people to grow. Well, a great way to get people to grow is to do missions of some kind, internationally or locally or somewhere in between. And while that's good and that does happen, that can't be your primary focus, because
Mm.
when the primary focus of missions in particular becomes internally focused within the context of the church and not externally focused on who is it we're trying to help and why, whether that's a missionary, a people group, another partner church in another country, another town, another city. If it's not focused on what benefits them, then there may be some decisions made, even again back to the idea of intentionality and strategy, unintentional decisions made that don't really help, but certainly make everybody at our church feel good,
Mm.
but aren't necessarily beneficial. So intentionality and strategy, and then be outward focused, focused on the people you're trying to help. What do they actually and really and truly need, and what will be a benefit to them? Moving them into an understanding of who God is and the way He works in His kingdom. I think are some really strategic things to think about.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to put this up. Little notes I took. Number one is just be intentional. And I think that goes a long way. So I'm going to make some broad sweeping, again, whoever's watching this, definitely not about your church, just about everybody else's. But a lot of times I've seen it's like we give to this cause or we go to this trip because person X, who usually happens to give a lot to the church, went there once or likes it a lot or really wants you to focus on it. And remember, I write big checks every month, or, maybe a slightly better version of that, which is, again, like you said, just a desire to do something. And so kind of a Google search, something that sounds good, something that sounds fun. And you're saying, be intentional. To me, I would think you would want your mission strategy to fall into the broader strategy of who you are as a local church. And I think it's a blessing from God that there's all types of flavors and setups, big churches, house churches. I mean, I think God uses that. And I actually think it's an intentional part of the design, even though it also gives people a lot of things to argue over, right? I don't like arguing over it. I just say, thank God that we have all these different kinds of churches. But, think about who you are and what your broader strategy is. And I think you would agree with this. Don't make missions some like segmented thing that you do because you feel like you've got to do it. Figure out how it fits into the broader strategy of who you're trying to reach, which can be a much deeper conversation of like, also have a strategy for the church that you're leading, so maybe, start there. And then number two, this is how I wrote it. And so you can give me better language if I need it, but focus on the mission more than the self. And then you broke that down, that the mission is not for discipleship. It's for service. And so the fact that growth, spiritual maturity, broader perspective, all of that will happen when you get out of America, get into, especially a developing country, third world country. All that's going to happen. And that's a great side effect, but that's not why we're going. The mission isn't for discipleship, it's for service. And if the goal is I have immature believers and I really want to blow their mind, so I'm going to take them to this impoverished country, I'm guessing you're saying that's a bad idea. This is to go, especially if you're going to go with the right motive, which is this isn't about me, and it's not about being comfortable, and it's not about, going on water slides, and it's not about getting the cool accessories to come home with. It's genuinely about the people that we're serving. Then you're going to have to know how to submit. Well, that's a spiritual discipline that needs to have been developed before you get on the airplane. You're going to be challenged and maybe even heartbroken. And do you know how to take that heartbreak to the feet of Jesus because you're in a regular rhythm of life of spending time at the feet of Jesus? Or are you just going to be like managing your way through the 7 stages of grief and not be helpful on this trip at all? Right. So I really love both of those. What are some examples to kind of get a little more pragmatic about maybe how you've seen those two things done well, really intentional strategy done well, people who are very mission focused, and maybe without naming names, some examples even to help us this is pragmatically what I'm saying not to do, or to really consider not doing, however strongly we want to say that.
Yeah, sure. I think so. To me, one of the things that is critical in that first step of being intentional is redefining, and I say redefining on purpose, redefining for your church what missions is. And so predominantly there are 2 definitions. We understand in the church, and a lot of people are very well educated or educated enough to understand, missions is Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and all there is the earth. Right, we get that. But in the functionality, missions typically ends up being one of 2 things. It ends up being intensely local, or it ends up being intensely international, but not always both to a intentional strategic degree. And part of that is helping your people redefine what missions is. And so rather than thinking of missions as missions is when we go out into the community and pick up trash, or we go down to the food bank and we do our week at the food bank handing out food, or we get on an airplane and we go to country XYZ and we serve for a week with ABC ministry doing whatever, 1, 2, 3, these 3 things. And that's missions. But rather redefine it as no, missions is a way of life. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of working. And so, yes, when you do those things, that's missions. But so is driving to work. So is your time spent grocery shopping. So is the time that you spend with your family around the dinner table or around the television or whatever it is. So helping people see missions as a way of living rather than sort of an event-driven thing. Because when it becomes a way of living, then that second part of focusing on the mission rather than the self starts to become pretty intuitive of, okay, now I'm looking at this going, how am I looking to serve? How am I looking to help in every aspect of my life? And so I stop looking for an experience and really start looking for a way to serve. Some things I've seen, I think there's probably a couple of, I don't know how much name dropping we can do on this podcast, right? But there's probably a comedian whose name sounds a lot like John Christ, that's made some really funny videos poking fun at some of the things like everybody wearing matching t-shirts through the airport, and hey, we're going to go, and yeah, sure, they've painted that school 12 times already this summer, kind of thing, or whatever. I'm probably butchering his comedy, but but the truth behind the funny is those things happen far too often, where if your inclination as a church or as a pastor or as a missions leader is to pick up the phone and call an organization or call a missionary or if you're doing something local, and say, hey, I want to bring a team of people to do 1, 2, 3.
Mm,
And that organization or that missionary or that whoever has not already communicated to you that they need someone to come and do 1, 2, 3,
mm,
then you're probably moving toward helping and hurting, or trying to help but actually hurting.
mm,
Um, and so really a lot of the process in developing and understanding how do I remove myself from it is doing a lot of listening,
yeah.
asking questions. How can we help? I told somebody today, my favorite answer to, hey, when I talk to another organization or a missionary, and I say, hey, let's talk about short-term teams. My favorite answer is no. We don't want short-term teams,
Mm,
because it just, to me, it alleviates in that conversation any pressure that they might feel to accommodate something that we want, that I think needs to get accomplished or somebody else needs to get accomplished. And now we can move that out of the way and we can really have a conversation about, okay, then here's what you can do to help, and here's what you can do to benefit. And it doesn't mean I'm not anti short-term teams. Gosh, Together for Haiti does a ton of them.
sure.
But be intentional and be strategic about it, so that what you're doing is benefiting the people. And I would say also think through it from the standpoint of, if we do this, if we go to this place and we do, whether it's local or international, and we do this particular project over the next 3 years, and then something happens and we can no longer go and be
Mm,
a part of that for whatever reason, can it continue without us?
mm.
Can the local people within that community context, whether it's another country or just down the street from where you live, can they continue on the work if we're not able to be there? And if the answer is no, you've got a problem
Mm.
that needs to be corrected.
That's great, man. So I'm going to put up a missions definition, and I definitely infused some of my own language in there. And so you can, I mean, please, give me a better one. But so redefining missions, a way of living, thinking, and working that seeks opportunities to give your life away for the good of others and the gospel, comma, not an event.
Yeah. Or
Something like that.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not an event or an experience. Yeah, for sure. That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I love that. We one of the things that we do at Meta Church to help people get emotionally healthy is we take them through their story, and your life story really functions on the same narrative arc that you could put any story, any novel or movie on. And the goal of any story is to be a hero. I mean, that's how you end up with a triumphant story. But typically, most people live as victims and villains, and we identify a heroic life as a life that gives yourself away for the good of others, and in a Christian context, for the good of others and in the spread of the gospel. And that really is, I mean, a heroic life is a life lived on mission. It's a life that is filled with purpose and that has focus. And I love the idea of, missions doesn't happen when you get to the homeless shelter. It doesn't happen when you get on the plane to Haiti. Missions happens just daily. And it's, again, we have systematic theology. So we talk about pneumatology and Christology and missiology and ecclesiology. And it's helpful for sure. But they're all like this. And it's like, what is the church? Well, it's the movement of Jesus called out people to be on mission. That's what an ecclesia is. It's just gathering people together, getting on the same page, and then going out and executing on a mission. It's like, what is evangelism? It is a mission. Take the good news of Jesus as far and wide as possible. So you can't actually just take these things and tear them apart and treat them truly like they're opposites, or not opposites, but individuals. I really, really love that. And, I see one of the reasons that I've just been so intentional about staying partnered with you is it's one thing to say all these things, and it's another thing to really live them and to practice them. Even at cost to yourself, and even potentially sometimes at cost to, the organization you're running, because dude, if you would just let people go down some water slides while they're in Haiti, it'd be a lot easier to get people to give you some money, you know? But that's your theology informing your philosophy and then playing out in your methodology. And it's also what has made Together for Haiti, partnered with Pastor John Aleeks over there, so incredibly effective. And so as we go into kind of my last line of questioning, I'd love for you to just expand a little bit on what Together for Haiti is actually doing on the island, the schools, the churches, the women's empowerment, community center, all that kind of stuff, what you guys are actually up to on the island, and help kind of pull some of these threads together just philosophically about how you guys go about those things and how you involve other, especially Westerners who want to go over and help.
Yeah, sure. So the structure of Together for Haiti is really, it's built around two very fundamental questions that Jean Aleeks kept asking in the early days, and as we were formulating what this was going to look like. And those two questions were, how do we train leaders to carry the work beyond our lifetimes, recognizing that some of the challenges in Haiti will outlive Jean Aleeks and I. Number one, and number two, how do we, there's an immense amount of dependency for all the reasons that we've already talked about. There's an immense amount of dependency that exists in Haiti, and what can we do to reduce that dependency, especially dependency on foreign aid and foreigners in general. And so out of that, really begin to ask some strategic questions and build some strategic questions, both around what Jean Aleeks had already been doing, and then what we wanted to be able to formulate into a strategy. And so looking at really at community development, recognizing that we are not going to be able to change all of Haiti tomorrow, or maybe even 10 years from now. But within the context of a singular community, we can see improvement and we can see change. And then at that grassroots level, maybe things begin to grow and take root and build beyond even what our scope would have been. And so looking at those things, we said, okay, then the number one question is always somebody's spiritual destiny. That do they have an opportunity to be connected to, number one, Jesus, and number two, a solid local church that's going to support them, train them, disciple them, and teach them. And so that became our spiritual development initiative that's really centered around providing tools and training and resources for pastors and church leaders to help them strengthen their community impact. And Jean Aleeks has been about that for many years and planted 10 churches. And so in every community that we work in, the center hub of what we do, there's a church and a pastor, a healthy church and a pastor that is impacting and reaching their community. And so our role as Together for Haiti, and as any foreigners that we'd bring, Americans that we would bring from here, our role is not to evangelize the Haitian people. Our role is to support the local churches in evangelizing their fellow Haitians. And so it sounds like semantics, but the philosophy behind it and the structure behind it is very, very different. And they do that well. We'll baptize 135 people here pretty soon that are part of Agape Church, which you're familiar with. And so that became the question number one. Question number two, that really was something Jean Aleeks was already doing, was what do we do? And this became our physical development. There were just questions that sort of, what do we do to meet immediate needs? So when a child in Haiti finds themselves abandoned or orphaned, what happens to them? What kind of medical needs exist? What kind of nutrition needs exist? And so that became our physical development. There's a saying in Haiti that translates roughly, the empty stomach has no ears. And so that became the issue within a community. And again, Jean Aleeks was doing a lot of that already. But that became the question of how do we respond to that? How do we respond to some of those immediate needs so that the issues, the emergency issues that are being faced that are caused by a lack of opportunity or a lack of financial ability or whatever it may be is taken off the table. And those questions then can be, then other things you want to say can be heard. Then educate. What about the education of the people? Do kids have access to quality, not just education, but quality education? And so that became our educational development piece. And so now has developed into 4 schools in rural communities, all underserved communities. And in 3 of those communities, if our schools didn't exist, there wouldn't be any other options. We've got an enrollment now of a little over 2,000 students between those 4 schools, and progressing. We've provided teacher training and resources and continuing education for them as well, because we want not only to support the children, but we also want to support the teachers and administrators that are making this happen. All of our teachers, I get asked this question a lot. All of our teachers, all of our administrators are Haitian. We don't have Americans down there teaching. We have Haitians teaching Haitian children and doing a really good job at that.
Yeah.
And then the education, the economic development piece came next of how do we help people improve their lives today, not just for eternity, not just for the future generations, but moms, dads, grandparents, aunt, uncles, single moms, widows. How do we come around them and begin to provide the tools, training, and resources? And that became our economic development piece. And so that started out as agriculture development, because the communities that we initially were in were all rural. And so that sort of made sense. We were surrounded by farmers. So let's work with farmers and help them improve the quantity and quality of food that they're growing, give them opportunities to expand and grow and do different things. And then, as we launched Agape Church back in 2014, and got settled into, began to build community in this larger, more urban setting. Agriculture development doesn't work when you don't, when you live in an apartment, and don't have land to farm. And so what do we do? And so out of that was birthed the Women's Entrepreneurship Program, Espoir Vivant, that provides job training and business development, entrepreneurial coaching, primarily for single moms in that setting. We've had a few married folks, a few widows, a few single women that didn't have any children, but mostly single mothers, and giving them an opportunity to develop the skills to lead a self-sustainable life, take care of themselves, their kids, provide housing. We've had 121 graduates out of that program to date.
Wow.
We've got another 70 that are in training right now, and as part of our 5th cohort, and working on raising the money for the 6th one, which will start in October of 2024, end of October of 2024. So there's been a lot of great, your metrics change depending on where you are. And so, for those that have been through the program, the very basic, questions we ask are, hey, can you send your kids to school? Can you provide sustainable housing and affordable housing for yourself? And are you able to provide food for you and your family on a consistent basis? And all 121 graduates can do all 3 of those things. Yes. And so that has been, and for a lot of them, that was a giant leap from struggle to success. And so that's been an incredible thing to see. And all of that, like you said, all of that is informed by our philosophy and our strategy and understanding that, as John Leake says all the time, the greatest thing you could ever do for anyone is introduce them to Jesus.
Right.
The second greatest thing you could do for anyone is educate them. And we've taken that education concept and really expanded it to in a lot of different ways to help people where they are today.
Wow. So this is, another perfect time to just let anyone listening know, togetherforhaiti.org. This is how you can help support the work going on for schools. I think in Haiti, John Leake, I know I've heard heard you say, most kids have dropped out by like 5th or 6th grade. There is no public education. Everything is paid. Most people can't pay for it. We've got 2,000 students who are in schools, 4 different schools. They're getting a hot meal every day, which is also a very big deal in Haiti. 9, 10 churches, something like that.
10, yeah. 10 churches. Yep.
10 churches, including Agape Church, which is pretty cutting edge for anywhere, but especially for Haiti. They'll have, I mean, over 1,000 people in service sometimes, like baptizing over, 100 people here pretty soon. We have women going through an entrepreneurship program. I mean, really incredible work. And part of this, I think, is a testament, because I know the size of crew you're working on. You guys are not Compassion International. You don't have a 10-story building somewhere in a metropolitan area. You guys are doing a lot with relatively little in the grand scope of nonprofit. I love that. I think that's what happens when you focus on mission. I do feel like Metachurch does that as well. We're very blessed, but for our size, we're pretty underfunded, but we do a lot. And I think it's just missional clarity. And when you're not worried about getting everyone down a few water slides during their trip, you can really expand out and do. And because I know you, everything you've described is a little piece of everything that's going on over there. You guys are really doing a lot. Togetherforhaiti.org. Hit that beautiful teal donate button. $5, $10, $20. If you win the Mega Millions, just drop maybe 15 million in there. Could really make a big difference. I think statistically speaking, odds are whoever wins the Mega Millions will watch this podcast. I think that's how statistics work. So
I think that's pretty close. Yeah, we'll redeem your lottery winnings for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a math major, but pretty sure that's how that works. Well, hey, as we come to a close, I think a lot of people listening to this will be aware. I think I've heard something about Haiti in the news recently. Most people, honestly, as close as Haiti is to us, for reference, I'm in San Antonio. It takes a lot longer to get to Fort Lauderdale than it does from Fort Lauderdale to Haiti. It's very close to us. But most people aren't really abreast of the situation in Haiti and exactly what's going on. You can go into whatever level of detail you want. Things have been very tricky over there for some time, and you can kind of get us caught up on that and the need that represents, and why we need more and more people coming alongside great organizations like Together for Haiti, and also just kind of why you remain hopeful for the island, even though most of the news coming out of Haiti is bad news right now. But why you remain hopeful and what you believe about the future of the island.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Haiti is always in the news for all the wrong reasons,
right?
And that's unfortunate. So currently, really, the last official election that they had, the last election of any kind that they had, was in 2016. So that was sort of the domino number one in their current timeline. There's some other stuff that was happening behind the scenes that we didn't know about at the time, but that was sort of the first visible speed bump in the last few years was a missed election. And I missed another one in 2018, and just kept getting it pushed down the road. Of course, COVID didn't help at all. Haiti was pretty miraculously spared, at least what the initial predictions and trajectory looked like. Still quite a few people got sick. A lot of people died, but not nearly the catastrophe that was initially predicted, which we're grateful for. But they did lock the country down for quite a while, which slowed a lot of things down for a lot of people. And in sort of the midst of that, both prior to that and in the midst of that, I think probably because people had a lot of time on their hands digging into stuff, there was some money that had been embezzled, roughly about $4 billion that had been embezzled out of the government that was supposed to be for infrastructure projects and a lot of things like that. And so, of course, then once that became public, lots of finger pointing and blame to go around for everybody. And so just caused a lot of chaos and a lot of question marks. And of course, every month, but every year that kept passing, there was no election. And so the president functioned more and more as they call it ruling by decree, essentially a dictator. And that just kept happening more and more. The final domino in the current sort of puzzle and piece that's going on was the president at the time, a guy named Jovenel Moise, was assassinated in July of 2021, killed in his home in the middle of the night. And so that was that sort of opened the abyss up. There was no government really to step into that role. and the international community didn't really respond effectively. And there was a power vacuum, and into that vacuum began to step gangs who now, since that time, have become more and more well-funded and more heavily armed. They fight with each other, and so that causes issues. They're snatching up territory. Most of this is in the Port-au-Prince area, and so think any kind of greater metropolitan area. It's the capital city, but the challenge is most everything flows in and out of Port-au-Prince for one reason or another, and so it has caused food shortages and fuel shortages nationwide. Even those that aren't dealing with violence are dealing with food shortages, fuel shortages, and so there's just this ripple effect that's happened as I think as people think, okay, it can't get any worse than this. It does. The gangs have used kidnapping and violence of all kinds to subdue populations and take over territory. And so that is really, there's just a giant amount of destabilization. And so now there's no elected officials at all in the government. Everybody's there sort of by appointee. There's been some demands that the acting prime minister step down. And of course, he's not going to. And so that's caused some stuff. And so you've got several different groups that are all working against each other, trying to find a solution forward. But a lot of it ends up being self-serving. And so there's just this critical impasse in Haiti right now. As a byproduct of that, out of fear and there's been probably roughly 300,000 people, maybe more, probably double that in reality if we actually counted people correctly, that have been displaced from their homes, that are essentially refugees in their own country, fleeing the violence. And so out of fear, because of everything that's going on, everybody that can leave Haiti is leaving Haiti. And so folks that have the ability to come here, either on a visa or a green card, the vast majority of them have already done that, probably about a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago. And then there's been several 100,000 people that have applied for this new parole program, which is a horrible name, by the way, but whatever, parole program that the Biden administration put together. And so they're getting visas to come here, 2-year visas to come here. Nobody said what happens at the end of that 2 years yet. So you're going to have a whole bunch of people that have been living here for a little while that are now sort of wondering. And the first batch of them, I think, are coming up on their 2-year time limit here pretty soon, not long after the election cycle in our country.
Wow.
And then, of course, you have people that just flee because they're afraid and they're desperate and they don't know what else to do. So they get on boats and they try to come across. They go to other countries and try to come up through Mexico and all that kind of stuff. They, and there's a lot of feeling about that and a lot of sentiment about that on different sides. What I know to be true is that most, if not all of those people are acting just out of sheer desperation. They don't have, at least they don't have any ill will. They don't want to break whatever laws, but they feel like they have no other option. And so they take these trips at incredible risk to themselves and their families, trying to get out of Haiti and get to a place that they feel like may be better and may be safer. And so it creates sort of this whole, then becomes this international issue, because all this attention is given to what's happening outside of Haiti, but very little attention to what's going on in Haiti and how to resolve it. And so there's been talk for almost, I guess, probably about a year and a half almost, about the UN sending or approving some sort of military type force to deal with the gangs. There's been some approvals and then stuff is kind of falling apart. So whether that happens this year or anytime soon is still a giant question mark. But it's tough to see. and to watch. I think what gives me hope through all of that, I think number one is that our work has progressed forward in spite of all of these things.
Yeah.
Um, and so our schools have remained open. We've had some occasional hiccups because of things that have gone on, but the mass school closings that have happened in Port-au-Prince have not happened to our schools. So our kids are not behind, which is
Mm.
critical.
Yeah.
And so that has been able to happen. We've had some construction projects working on a community center, working on a school expansion. Those have continued much
Mm.
slower and much much more expensive
Mm.
than we initially anticipated because of what's going on, because of the fuel shortage and inflation and just the price of goods everywhere that's going up, even here.
Yeah.
That impacts there. And so, but those things have continued to move forward. Our churches have continued to meet. People are continuing to meet Jesus as their
Mm.
Savior, to hear the gospel shared and presented. Our women's entrepreneurship program has moved forward. They've been able to meet. Everybody's graduated on time,
Mm.
and are finding decent employment and the ability to start jobs and start businesses. Um, and those things alone are absolutely miraculous,
Mm.
um, and that's incredible to see. And so that gives me hope that God has allowed us to continue to move forward. Um, I think the Haitian people give me hope.
Mm.
That they are some of the kindest, most generous, most hospitable people I have ever met in my life. Um, they they struggle because there's not an infrastructure and a mechanism within their country to deal with some of the problems they have.
Sure.
But they don't sit around and wallow in that.
Mm.
But many that I know work hard to do the best they can to provide for their families,
Mm.
to take care of themselves, and to do the best with what's in front of them, even when it's not easy. And incredibly generous people in all of my experiences, everywhere I've been, and I've been coast to coast in that country, front and back,
Mm.
north, south, east, and west, and I think that gives me hope in knowing that um, it it's yeah, with the gospel and with the right opportunities and the right resources and tools and training, they can still turn this thing around.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Man, I love that. Nobody gets into this deep anyway and survives this long in full-time mission work without a profound trust in the Lord. And I'm very thankful for you, man. I'm thankful for the work that you're doing, whether you know it or not, the example that you set for me. You're a great perspective shift for me sometimes, because sometimes I'm like, oh, my job's hard today, and then I'm like, my main people I'm shepherding aren't like being held hostage by gangs all day long. And then I'm like, okay, I'm fine, and I can keep my eye on the ball and keep doing that work. So you're very inspiring. I appreciate, once again, just some real light bulb moments for me in this conversation, helpful for me in someone who is leading a church and wants to be on mission and living missional lives. Some very helpful ways to think about that. And so I really appreciate your time. I'm going to remind people one time before you go that you can go to togetherforhaiti.org. And this is your button right here, this beautiful aqua button. I'm just really going to prove throughout this podcast how little I know about colors. People are going to think I'm colorblind by the end of this. This beautiful rouge, I don't even know, that's not a word. Click donate. Give $5 a month, give $10 a month, whatever you can give to help support the incredible work that's going on over there. If you enjoyed this conversation, want to see more like it, or want to check out the actual podcast where I go through events in the news, then make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel, youtube.com/Clayton Tyner. Be sure to subscribe, hit the little bell if you want to get notified when I put new stuff out. I'm going to just continue trying to have some really robust conversations, gleaning some insights from people. Danny, I really appreciate your time and you being on the podcast. For everyone else, we will see you soon.